to wars with our swords in our hands, against the sea with our backs to the walls, against distress in the presence of our enemies, against the storms roaring at our faces. The cry rang out throughout the skies, epic in the flight of the cranes. The call of the mountains, the call of the Alps, the call, the dead in our hearts, the sound of
Welcome again to another edition of Modern Heathenry. And today I'm flying solo. I'm your host, Everett Farnell. Today I'm flying solo because our normal co-host, Brian Wilton, the preeminent heathen philosopher of our day, is busy living the faith and leading men in a role as a supervisor that is taking up about 12 or 13 hours a day, 20 or 21 days in a row without a day off. So needless to say, he is buried in work. And while he is occasionally posting, I'm glad to see that. He just trying to schedule a time to get together and do a podcast is just not working. So I'm just going to be flying solo today. I hope you enjoy the podcast. But I wanted to talk very briefly about something that happened last night. You see, there was a storm coming through, no big deal, thunderstorm, and I was on my way to bed, and I felt like I wanted to go out and sit outside. I didn't necessarily want to go sit in the rain, but I did want to go sit outside and just kind of hang out outside in the storm. So I went out on my screen porch, and I sat out there, and I started thinking about a few things, started thinking about a few points of reference with our gods and what the gods actually represent and what they actually are. Of course, I'm sitting in a thunderstorm, so we all know that that's, we're talking about Thor, Thunar, Donar. And so I'm sitting there, and a couple of things occurred to me. First, what occurred to me is our gods really are our values. So I don't think that there's any heathen alive today who believes that there's some big red-bearded guy running around with a hammer, or some old guy with a gray beard and one eye running around with a spear, etc., etc. I think we understand that these images, these anthropomorphized, I think the word is, images that we have of the gods, is meant to communicate something to us. So what's the purpose of, who are the gods then? Now, I do happen, and I know some heathens don't share this. I do happen to believe that the gods, in addition to being ideas or archetypes, I do believe that they are actual entities and actual energies in the world. I just don't believe that they are physical entities or energies. Now, that said, the purpose of the gods, or the reason that our ancestors of faith, our culture, has been so successful is because of the values that those gods represent. The values are actually where the rubber meets the road. And and by the way, I am a firm believer in taking pride in the achievements of our ancestors of faith and in the achievements of people who after the conversion still stuck to the values of our gods. But I don't think that we can take personal pride in them. I think that we can take pride in them from the point of view that these were our ancestors of faith, and that we understand what they went through, or have some intellectual knowledge about what they went through. But I don't think that we can say that we did this, or that, you know, I mean, I hate it when I hear people say, well, you know, we built the Western world. Well, you didn't do anything. Okay, you sat behind your computer. You know, your ancestors of faith built the Western world, and yes, they did for sure. They did sail and find, you know, find America. Although I'm pretty sure, if I recall my history correctly, Leif was a Christian, but certainly his father was not. So he was one generation removed, and had been raised by a heathen father. So certainly, you know, certainly shades of the old gods there. But so I just hate it when people take undue liberties with what they have done when actually they didn't do anything. It was our ancestors of faith that did these things. And I say ancestors of faith because, let's face it, we're not all blood related. But we are related through a common faith. And I would extend that probably even to the Celts and say that the Celts had a very similar, not identical, but very similar religious experience that the Germanic tribes had. So our ancestors of faith is, you know, who we really want to look at. But what was it about, you know, what was it about these people, about these values that created such an amazing, you know, such an amazing culture that has literally shaped the world for 1,000 years? You know, what is it that did this? What's created such a, you know, why have we been so successful? We, meaning our ancestors of faith. Why has the Western world been so successful when so much of the rest of the world wasn't? I mean, look, you know, you look back and you say, well, you know, the Greeks weren't heathens. The Greeks had their own kind of polytheism, right? They did, and the Greeks were very successful in that little area of the world. You know, Alexander the Great did amazing things, but I don't think you can compare Alexander the Great's achievements to the achievements of the British Empire, for example. Now I know the British Empire had had gunpowder. You know, I understand that. I understand there were technological changes, but not such amazing technological changes. I mean, you know, there were definitely some changes. There were definitely some advancements, but our ancestors, you know, the Vikings, had seaworthy vessels that were going, you know, from that sailed over to Canada. That, you know, I mean, so it's not like you know, transportation was such a you know, was such an issue. It was just the desire and the willingness to go. And outside of a very few examples, like Alexander the Great, it's kind of hard to find historical examples of people who have had such amazing and long-lasting effects on the world. So you have Alexander the Great, but when he was gone, so was his empire, right? The British Empire lasted generations. It did finally fall to economic concerns, like most empires do. But you know, and of course, the Roman Empire was larger than Alexander's, and the Romans did some pretty amazing things. But at the end of the day, we ended up with a Germanic king on the throne of the Holy Roman Empire. Right? So Charlemagne, Charles the Butcher, if you will, ended up as the you know, on the throne of the Holy Roman Empire. It just seems this happens over and over again, right? The whatever the outside forces, whatever the other culture was that our ancestors faced, they ended up coming out on top, and they ended up coming out on top through a combination of economic and military war, economic and military maneuvers, economic and military techniques. And what was it that created such an incredibly powerful, incredibly successful culture? I mean, look, you know, Asia today is becoming westernized. Now, I mean, these are cultures. You know, Asia is a culture, with the Asian cultures date back thousands and thousands of years, and they're becoming westernized. And for much of the much of the rest of the world that was not advanced really at all, the Western world has the Western cultures have drugged them. Many less advanced cultures have drugged those cultures into the modern world. Now, some people get upset about it and say, that there's issues with that, whatever. But my point is that over and over and over again, Western culture has proven to be dominant. Now, I don't mean to say dominant as better, but has proven to be dominant when dealing with other cultures. You can make your own decision as to whether it was better or worse or whatever, but they certainly, the Western world has certainly come out. Western culture has certainly come out on the with the upper hand on the high end of the spectrum as far as success goes when dealing with other cultures. It was other cultures who adjusted and accommodated themselves to match the Western world, as opposed to the Western world adjusting and accommodating itself to meet other cultures. Even Christianity, in its founding doctrine, was pretty brutal until it became Germanicized, until the Romans and specifically the Germanic tribes got a hold of it and kind of moderated some of the craziness that was found in the Bible. You can still go back today and read parts of the Bible that that'd make your ass pucker if Christians were actually still doing these sorts of things. So what is it that has allowed our ancestors of faith to build? What is it that allowed our ancestors of faith to build such an amazing culture that has done so much good for the world and has done so many good things? And I think there's a couple of points. Number one, I think it has to do with what Brian and I talked about in the last podcast. It has to do with individualism, a balance between individualism and tribal loyalties and familial loyalties. So there's no question that and in the modern world, we decide to become a part of a tribe, which was kind of the point of that conversation that Brian and I had a couple days ago. But even in Iron Age Germany, there was a responsibility to the tribe, but that responsibility of the tribe was also balanced with a desire to improve oneself beyond your current circumstances. I kind of encapsulate this in saying that the purpose of heathenry is to take common men and make them nobles. The whole point of a society that is upwardly mobile and downwardly mobile is to, and our ancestors' society, by the way, was. So even in post-conversion times, there was still a remnant of this left. So if a knight, or a thane, as they called them, in England was able to maintain, I think it was enough land to feed 4 families or 5 families. I forget. It's either 4 or 5, I believe. And they had an oven. They had a bakery, so they had an oven. They were treated, if a commoner was able to maintain the land for 4 or 5 families and have an oven, have a bakery, then they were treated as a minor nobleman, a thane. And if they were able to maintain that for 2 or 3 generations, whatever the number was, then the family was actually elevated in status to minor nobility. Now, what that tells us is that they recognized one person doing really well, and then they also recognized that if that continued in the family, it was something that the family was effectively teaching from generation to generation, and that they could become part of the nobility. So there was definitely some upward and downwardly mobile activities in the societies that were founded or that were based on the teachings of the Aesir and the Vanir. So I think that's one thing, is a balance between individual glory, wanting to be remembered, wanting to gain wealth and renown for yourself. These are all well-established understandings of the desires of men in in heathen tribes. But then also there was a responsibility to the tribe. So you couldn't just slash and burn and grab everything for yourself. So there's a balance there. Interestingly enough, it also happens to be the balance that, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, so I apologize, but he was the guy that Russell Crowe played in A Beautiful Mind. That was actually based on a real economist, and that economist won a Nobel Prize for realizing, if you've ever seen the movie, you might remember the bar scene where he's sitting with and the three girls walk in, and Russell Crowe, whoever the character was sitting with a couple of his buddies, and that was the genesis of the paper that he wrote that ended up winning him the Nobel Prize. And the basis of that paper, and of course it goes into great detail explaining it, but the basis of that paper is that there's a balance between individual and societal responsibilities. Now, I do want to point out, I do want to mention, I don't want people to get the idea that I think that socialism is a good idea, because I am dead set against it. Now, you may be for it or you may be against it, but I am dead set against it. So I don't want you to mistakenly think that what I'm saying is an advocation of socialism. It is an advocation. I'm advocating for somebody to take an enlightened self-interest view of their relationship with their tribe, not for a government to use guns to come steal your stuff and redistribute it among other people. So I just want to make that very clear. But I think that's one. I think that's one issue. And probably the main one. We're getting a little long in the tooth here as far as time goes, so I'm probably going to cut it off quickly. But I think, like I said, the main reason to me that our ancestors were able to accomplish what they accomplished is because of the values and the value of individualism specifically. I mean, let's look at the lore. Right, look at the lore. People are always working to gain word fame, to gain renown, to improve their status in life. I mean, this is not. The sagas are full of people who work hard to become more well known and more well respected. I mean, this is why people live by their word. This is why people. They wanted to maintain a reputation and be thought well of by people in their tribe and even people outside of their tribe once they get to a certain level. I mean, we certainly do want to, we don't want to just have the few people around us thinking well of us. I mean, we definitely want them to think well of us, but it would be nice to have some word fame outside of that as well. It'd be nice to have some fame outside of that. But they did it with a nod to and a responsibility for the tribe. And I think that's one of the major values that our gods represent. I mean, let's look what happens when, we'll use Laufey's son, Loki, as an example, when he gets frustrated and angry and attacks the eagle, right? And we all know what story this is from. It's the story about Idona's apples. He attacks the eagle, and the eagle flies away with him stuck. And then, to save his own skin, he promises anything. Just let me go. So the eagle extracts a promise that he will deliver Idona. And he does that, even though it's damaging for his tribe, right? For his adopted tribe. So he delivers Idona, and then and now he's got to go get her back, because everybody is going to Thor's going to hit him with a hammer, right? Thor's going to crown him if he doesn't go get Iduna back. So see, the whole time he's acting in self-interest. He's not acting in self-interest balanced by the interests of the tribe. On the other hand, we can look at Odin, who definitely is looking for wisdom and definitely is looking to get, throughout all of the stories, he's looking to expand his knowledge, he's looking to expand his fame, he's looking to expand his power, but he does so in a way that also helps Asgard and that also helps humanity. So, yes, he is definitely looking to get more powerful, but through the stories, he makes these decisions that on the surface you would think, oh my God, what a horrible, what a, he goes and murders 5 field workers with trickery in order to get the mead of inspiration. However, he gives some of the meat of inspiration to humanity, and he also uses the meat of inspiration in Asgard to to help the tribe. But he also is, of course, inspired by it. So he gains in wisdom and gains in skaldic ability. So all of these things, there's a balance with him, whereas with Loki, there's no balance. Loki, it's very cut and dry. He was just acting in complete self-interest, and over again, he almost brings down Asgard. Now, some people point out the gifts of the gods. Yes, he did. He did get the gifts of the gods after he cut Sif's hair off, and yes, he is definitely a creator of change, and and a progenitor of chaos, and so he has his place in the lore, but. It's one of the places, one of the important points in the lore is to remember that his place in the lore is as much to warn against what these forces do if you let them into your house, what these chaotic forces do if you let them into your hall, if you let them into your house. They can create problem after problem after problem. Those problems create change, but sometimes we've got to wonder if the change is worth it, especially when we read what happens at the end. So anyway, that's enough for today. Just remember that our gods and Brian and I and hopefully you want for yourself, we want you to be the best that you can be. We want you to be the wisest that you can be, to be the most successful that you can be. We want you to accomplish things that will have your family and your tribe, and maybe even people outside of your family and tribe, speaking your name for generation after generation and after generation. Live your life, my friends, like you want to be remembered, and you just might be.